Welcome to theartofpaddling.com. In this video, we'll look at the heel hook paddle float self-rescue. The heel hook variation requires far less balance and far less strength than the standard paddle float reentry, and can be performed by most paddlers in most conditions with practice. As with most self-rescues, the heel hook variation of the paddle float rescue begins with a capsize and wet exit. All of the normal rules for a wet exit apply. Make sure that you maintain contact with both your boat and your paddle. In order to free my hands, I'm maintaining contact with my paddle by using the crook of my arm, and I'm maintaining contact with the boat by putting my feet and my legs inside the boat. I've retrieved my paddle float. I'm now putting it onto the paddle blade and securing it to the shaft with the straps. The next step is to inflate the paddle float using the valves and the tubes. Make sure that you inflate both sides of the paddle float to ensure that you have the most possible flotation. Once the paddle float is inflated, I'll flip the boat upright and begin the reentry process. You'll see two variations on the heel hook paddle float reentry. One from a stern camera and one from a bow camera, without narration. Now let's view it again, and we'll narrate the critical points. First, you'll notice the positioning is different than a standard paddle float rescue. Rather than being behind the paddle, I'm actually in front of the paddle, even with the cockpit. Paddle positioning is the next critical point. You'll notice that the blade of the paddle has gone underneath the deckline on the far side of the boat. You'll also notice that on the near side of the boat, I'm pinning the paddle shaft to the deckline using my hand. Pinning the paddle shaft to the near side of the boat in this manner, using either the deckline or, in the worst case scenario, your cockpit combing, is critical to the success of the heel hook variation. I'm now ready to perform the heel hook reentry. As I float in the water facing the cockpit, I will take my bow side leg and place it into the cockpit. I'll then take my bow side hand and reach across the boat, grabbing either a deck line or the combing on the other side of the boat. To re-enter the boat, I simply straighten my leg and pull myself onto the boat with my bow side hand. I'm now face down on the kayak with both legs in the cockpit. In order to complete the re-entry, I need to continue my rotation in the same direction and switch hands on the paddle shaft so that my weight continues to be balanced on the paddle float. Here's the heel hook variation on the paddle float reentry again from the front. Notice how smooth, fluid, and effortless the reentry is, especially when compared with a standard paddle float reentry from behind the paddle on the back deck. After the reentry is complete, move the paddle in front of your body. Pin the shaft to your combing with your waist or your belly. Retrieve your pump and pump your boat dry. Partially fastening your spray skirt and placing your pump into the remaining opening will prevent waves from swamping your cockpit in rough water. Continuing to pin your paddle shaft to your cockpit combing with your upper body will allow you to use the paddle float for extra support and stability while you pump out the boat. When the boat is empty of water, stow your pump and fasten your spray skirt. To remove the paddle float from your paddle, undo any straps that may be around the shaft, open the valves, and either squeeze it against your chest or press the paddle float down in the water to release the air. Once sufficient air has been released, slide the paddle float off of the paddle blade, roll it up, and stow it in a safe place. Finally, before paddling off, do a double check, make sure that your grab loop is out, and head for shore.